heavier week than we've had recently. There were 7 new books featuring Batman this week, and I got all of them. Those titles were, starting with the non-continuity books, we got Batman Beyond the White Knight, issue number 2. Really need to catch up on this series so I can read this. Dark Knights of Steel, issue 6 of 12. Another title I've been letting build up that I'm excited to binge read. And then as far as the continuity books go, it was a heavy week for Shadow War. We got part 3 in Deathstroke Inc. number 8 and part 4 in Robin number 13. Excited to give both of those ones a read. This will be my first issue of Deathstroke Inc. So excited to check that out. I've heard some good things from some other YouTubers. And then outside of the Shadow War storyline, Detective Comics kicks off a new arc this week. The first new arc in 12 issues. Really excited to see where this goes. End of the Tower storyline, we got the tease that the Riddler was going to be the next villain that Mariko Tamaki was tackling. And after leafing through this, I saw that Ivan Reis is back on art, which is really exciting. We got Harley Quinn issue 14 and part 2 of the Verdict storyline. Part 1 was okay, off to a sensible enough start. We'll see how it develops. And then finally, the title I kind of forgot existed, The Joker number 14. I don't know if this had a hiatus month or if it's just because of the 5-week month that this one feels late for some reason. But here it is, wrapping up the massive Bane, Vengeance, Joker, Gordon storyline that's been running since issue 1, and also the conclusion of the Punchline backup story that's been running just as long. And that's everything I picked up. So like I said, pretty heavy week. I'm going to get to reading these because I've got 5 different books to go through so I can let you guys know what happened this week in Batman. Okay, so having had the chance to sit down, read through my books, I was able to organize these from least favorite to most favorite this week. It's been very up and down the last few weeks, and this week it was very middling. But at the end of the day, there was only one book that really stood out as like, oh, that's definitely pick of the week, and everything else was just kind of riding in the middle somewhat. So kicking things off is the book that kind of disappointed me the most, but again, keep in mind the context. I did enjoy all the books that I read this week, and this one was no exception. It was just kind of the weakest one overall, partly because I was really pumped getting into it, and that was Deathstroke number 8. This is Shadow War Part 3. Shadow War Part 2 did a really excellent job continuing to ratchet up that story. And Deathstroke suffered from 2 problems. First of all, it devolved into lots of just kind of montages of punching. As a matter of fact, here's a great example of it right here, which is kind of what I was afraid Shadow War would turn into. There just wasn't that much kind of going on in the story outside of, you know, everyone's fighting, and then Deathstroke and Respawn are just kind of holed up, killing time together. Ideally, the stuff between Deathstroke and Respawn, you know, would kind of carry you through the book, and you'd think it'd be kind of interesting to watch their relationship kind of develop a little bit more. Again, not knowing what happened in Deathstroke issues 1 through 7, I haven't read those, so maybe there's more of that in there. I honestly just don't know. But everything that Williamson did with those 2 characters just felt kind of trite and played out. We do get to recap kind of what happened at the end of Batman between Batman and Talia. And as the issue continues, we get more sort of punching and kicking in as all the various different pawns get moved around so we can set up the next round of matches with Robin, which will be later on in the list. No spoilers as to where it ended up. Overall, this book just kind of kept reminding me of the fact that I don't understand how it is that Batman doesn't already realize that Deathstroke didn't actually kill Ra's al Ghul. I just feel like there are too many obvious clues pointing away from Deathstroke for Batman to be completely duped by that narrative. The other thing, which I didn't really talk about as I was flipping through the book, is the art in this didn't really work for me. We'll flip back to this montage page, actually, because I think it's pretty representative, where I think it boils down to the backgrounds are just very empty. And I think that there's just an over-reliance on, like, you know, computer rendering and coloring to sort of make up the difference. You know, a lot of it is just kind of like color tricks, and there's not really that much line work going on. Whereas when you get to the characters themselves, I feel like they're pretty expressive, but in somewhat of a cartoony way, and they're almost like over-illustrated. It's just like kind of a weird style to me. It doesn't quite sit right. I don't know if this is the regular artist on this title, or if they're just filling in during the Shadow War event. This certainly didn't turn me off to checking out Deathstrokes 1 through 7. I am going to read that Deathstroke 7 that I still haven't quite gotten to. I picked it up last week. I think I showed it off in last week's reviews. If all of the art is like this, I probably won't go back and check out issues 1 through 6, but if they got a different artist on it, I'm confident enough in the YouTuber recommendations that I've gotten and Joshua Williamson to go ahead and give it a try. All right, next up, gasp, not bottom of the list, but not too far away either, was Harley Quinn number 13? 14 now we're on. Yeah, you know, I've always complained about the art on this one too. I felt like this one, honestly, probably some of the best art of the series so far, because I think there was a better use of color in it, maybe. There's just a lot darker tones going on here, a lot more shadows. Kind of made the artwork pop a little bit better. I do genuinely like the layouts that Riley Rossimo sets up in these, whether that's, you know, Stephanie Phillips or Riley Rossimo setting that up. It's sometimes hard to know. Honestly, the most intriguing thing about this book to me was the inclusion of Batwoman, because I really love that character. Ever since she showed up in Detective Comics with that 854 or something like that, I've always been a big fan of that character. And the idea of her teaming up with Harley Quinn as sort of the only person believing she's not guilty of the crimes she's committed, I think makes for a great touch that I'm excited to see where it goes. Now, Harley Quinn is newly single, and I hope, you know, they don't turn that into a thing. But there's definitely a good potential for some tension, some comedy with that sort of a team up. For Harley Quinn to work, she really needs a straight man, and I think Wonder Woman will be a good straight man for a couple of issues. I think that's actually a pretty great idea for a team up. The other thing I liked about this title was they actually did sort of address the elephant in the room, which is that, you know, where is the Bat family in all of this? You know, shouldn't they be on Harley Quinn's side with her having sort of turned over a new leaf? Like, why isn't the rest of the Bat family more involved? Both Batwoman and Harley Quinn, you know, directly call that out as a plot point, which I kind of appreciated that they addressed it. Okay, so the next title on my list, middle of the road. If I were to look back, I would bet this is the middle of the road title across the board. Like, it started high on the list, and then it just kept kind of going down, and then it settled as like, you know, 3rd out of 5 every single week that it came out. Once you got to issues like 4 or 5 or whatever, and it's a title that everyone got completely sick of, and I've been the one that's been like, oh, you know, it's actually still pretty good. If you were cranky about the Joker, okay, if you're someone who's like, oh, this title is taking forever, it's so slow, well, guess effing what? 14 isn't even the end of this story. I could not believe that we got a to be concluded at the end of issue 14. So apparently there's an issue 15 coming. I think that this must have been some kind of a mistake, because I'm certain, I didn't go back and look, but I am certain that issue 13 also said to be concluded. And Punchline did actually conclude at the end of this issue. So I think that they needed an extra issue, because they had drawn this story so far out that somehow they couldn't even fit it all into 14 issues, and they're going to need a 15th. Now, whether that means we're going to get one more Punchline backup, or will we get a backup? I mean, I know the solicitations are out there. I have no idea, though. I don't pay very close attention to that stuff. So you guys probably know. You can let me know down in the comments. But I'm excited to see next month how they end up actually wrapping this whole thing up. It's comical that this story isn't over yet. As far as the story itself goes, it was fine. The thing about the way they do this is it's like they have some kind of a big tease, and then they cut ahead to the next piece of non-action, and then flash back to the thing that you actually wanted to see. And they do that yet again, you know, for the climax of the story between Bane, Vengeance, and the Joker. It's all told in flashback because they want that hard-boiled Gordon detective story voice in it, I guess. And for me personally, I don't hate it. It doesn't bother me because I enjoy a slow burn. But if you were to call out Tinian for constantly taking the wind out of this book's sails at every turn, I can't disagree with you. Like, you're not wrong. It's comical. The biggest disappointment for me overall with this is the fact that, you know, we left Gilliam March in the dust and replaced him with Giuseppe Camuncoli, who is fine, but kind of similar to the artist on Deathstroke. I find his panels to just be a little bit lacking, a little bit empty, and so different in tone, you know, to the Gilliam March that we're still getting on the covers of these, that I always end up just a little bit disappointed. I don't know that I'm going to talk endlessly about the story in this because, you know, it is wrapping up. If you haven't been reading up to this point, why bother explaining it? And if you have been, I don't want to necessarily spoil it. But the big question of what happened between Gordon and the Joker on that ranch with the cannibals is still an open question, I guess we'll say. Oh, and I just realized I forgot to talk about the Punchline backup story. It was fine. Honestly, nothing to write home about. It was kind of a flashback, recap kind of a thing. The Royal Flush Gang is in there briefly. It didn't really feel like much of anything. It felt like filler because Punchline's story really ended an issue ago. Maybe Joker was supposed to be like 12 issues, and then now it's somehow going to be 15. Maybe that's what's going on. I don't know. All right, second favorite book of the week is going to go to Detective Comics 1059. We are kicking off a new Joker storyline in which the Joker is a radio host, and he has pirate radio, and he's, you know, laying clues for all these various different crimes going on in Gotham City. And Batman is trying to figure out who the culprits are and what's really going on because other people are confessing to these crimes who are not the Riddler, yet the Riddler seems to know everything that's sort of going on. This is a wonderful sort of throwback in a couple of ways. If you look back on the old like Batman Columbia serials, this sort of has that feel to it. I can't remember if it was Batman or Batman and Robin. I think it was Batman and Robin. There was a, you know, voice of terror character that was terrorizing the airwaves, and Batman would have to respond week to week to what was going on. This sort of harkens back to that. It also sort of has ties to the Batman audio adventures, which are on HBO Max. I actually have to finish that. I'm like 6 episodes in, and there's like 10. It's a great radio show. I actually really enjoy it. The only thing that's inconvenient about it is the fact that you have to physically watch it on HBO Max, which sort of takes away, like, I'd like to be able to like listen to it while I'm exercising or something. It's just not that convenient for that. But long story short, they've kind of taken that version of the Riddler and plopped him into Detective Comics here, which is fun because it feels like a classic Riddler story. It seems like whenever you see the Riddler, even as far back as, you know, early modern era 80s Riddler, they're trying to find ways to like reinvent that character away from just the traditional criminal mastermind who leaves riddles for Batman. Like, it's not that complicated, but they always have to do a year zero, or they have to pump him full of venom, or they have to do some kind of a thing to make him seem different. This feels like a modern take on a classic Riddler. So that was something I really appreciated about this book. Now, beyond that, I don't have a ton to say about the story because it's really just getting going. There's kind of a weird moment with Judge Donovan, who is the daughter of Deb Donovan, which I don't think there are a lot of like 20-something judges out there. I feel like it takes a while for you to be practiced enough in the law to be a judge, and you have to be a lawyer for like a really long time. So either Deb Donovan and Carolyn Donovan are a lot older than they look, or there's something weird going on there. I'm pretty sure they said it was her daughter. It would have made more sense if she was her sister, but that, you know, whatever. Comic book logic doesn't really matter, I guess. Ultimately, it didn't take away from the fun of the story, and the great Ivan Reis, of course, on artwork, who is always a favorite of mine. Probably the biggest thing holding this back from being pick of the week was, in my opinion, the terrible Gotham Girl Interrupted backup story that we got in this. I just didn't understand why this needed to exist at all. There's a possibility maybe it will tie into the main storyline because Gotham Girl is fresh out of Arkham Tower and there are allusions to Arkham Tower in the main story, but I don't think that's the case because this isn't written by Mariko Tamaki. And so you just have this sort of a side story of the neurotic young blonde woman who happens to have superpowers. It just didn't do anything for me. It felt very trite and cliche. And honestly, the Gotham Girl character to begin with is not really my favorite. I thought that first issue of the Tom King run where Batman's trying to stop a plane crash and it's like completely bananas over the top was a lot of fun to read. But the super team Gotham Girl and whatever her brother's name was honestly didn't do a whole lot for me. And the more they kept popping back into that Tom King run, the more I was like, ugh, just go away. I don't like you. So now she's back. I guess, whatever, I don't really care, that's fine. And so then that leaves our pick of the week. Bookending this review, actually, is Shadow War Part 4, which I absolutely loved. This was a complete riot. I read this right after reading Shadow War Part 3 because I wanted to sort of get the whole story for the week in one fell swoop. And after Part 3, I was like, oh, this is kind of going more in the direction I was expecting it to. And then something crazy happens in Part 4. As I was reading it, we pick right up where we left off, this time with Robin, Ravager, Deathstroke, and Respawn all having their cage match, which was at least a more interesting matchup than some of the matchups we got in the Deathstroke story, which were very montagey and uninteresting to me. This one at least had a lot more gravitas to it just because of the relationships that have been built up with all those characters. But then it gets really interesting because Deathstroke is able to kind of get a word in edgewise, speak some sense into Damian Wayne, and the way he's able to do that is really where the big surprise in this book happens. That really was the cool jaw-dropping moment for me. And I don't know if this is something that's been revealed before. It felt like it was a reveal for this book. So let me know if I, missed it somewhere else, but it was the first time I had found out about it, and I thought it was a really cool development for one of the characters in this. And it definitely reoriented a lot of our main characters in such a way that it left me excited to find out now what's going to happen with Part 5, now that we've got Batman and Damian Wayne kind of working together again, and, all those kind of little pieces, because it's going to spoil the surprise. The only thing holding this book back for me was the art. It was fine. I'm not really complaining. I would just say that's the only downside of this book is we don't have Malinker on art right now, and it shows. And so that wraps up my week in Batman. I think the 2 books that everyone else is going to be talking about this week are going to be the only 2 books I didn't actually review for you. Sorry about that. But part of the conceit of this show is, talking about the week-to-week soap opera of Batman, which doesn't usually include sort of the Elseworlds types of things. One of the things I want to make sure I'm doing, and I haven't been able to do because I've been super busy, is talk more about the non-continuity stuff in other videos, because there's so many interesting things going on there. That's where I think that's where everyone else is getting the most enjoyment out of Batman right now, and it's the thing I talk about the least. So I'm trying to figure out a way to rectify that. I am going to be doing a state of the channel update video, so I'll explore some of those thoughts a little bit more in that. So be sure to tune back in for that. In the meantime, I hope you guys have a great week in comics. Thanks for watching this video, and take care.